Events is about relationship building. Events is about connection. Events is about engagement. Events is about curiosity. Events is about it's not just the booth. There's the booth, there's the breakfast, there's the networking, there's the evening, there's the dinners, there's all these different things. And I think sometimes it takes somebody to explain that to them. Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. I'm your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. Today, I have the wonderful Coty, our Director of Sales and Marketing. Hi, Coty. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone.
Yep. We have a cool show today. As always, going to give you the best hour that we can give you in the middle of your week. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here with us. You know, we don't take it for granted, so we're going to do our best. So we hosted our own event, EMC, the Event Marketing Congress, back in June. We have had many of these sessions, these live shows. We've also done some private virtual sessions with some of the event marketers that come to our own host event in our community, podcast guests and people like that. And then Coty, myself, and Molly from our team recently got back from SEMA. And one thread that we are seeing is event marketers frustrated with sales and frustrated with the handoff and the follow through of leads and what goes on at the event. So we thought this would just be a great topic to discuss today. You're going to say something, Coty?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think during our own private event at EMC, we actually carved out, it was not originally on the agenda. It had just come up in some of our think tanks, and we had to carve out some extra time to almost go through a therapy session around how they're feeling about the challenges of you're putting on this event, you're planning it, you're literally pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And then it's so sad and disappointing when you're finding all of these opportunities and having great conversations, and it gets passed right off to sales. And then it's like, wah, they're not calling them. They're giving excuses. And it's not to honestly rip on sales, because I think that when sales and event teams are completely aligned along with marketing, it's really a beautiful relationship and it's so incredibly powerful. But it's interesting to see how many individuals are raising their hand when we're bringing this up that are dealing with this or struggling with the pass off from the event onto sales.
Love that. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try to give you some high level stuff, right? It's more directional. It's more what's going on. It's more the problems people are facing, and then more just sort of a little bit of high level, how we would handle things in a grander picture. We're also going to give you some very tactical stuff, some very specific stuff that we would do. I think one thing why this is so important is because I think we talked about this on our previous podcast while at SEMA, and I've talked about it a bunch recently, is the direction that events are going is pipeline influence. That is the direction events are going. Companies want to know, how do our events influence pipeline? And it's very important. So I think this relationship with sales, it just has to get better. It's going to continue to have to get better. And I think, like always, there's two sides of the coin. There's two stories to everything. There's two different departments. So from our side, from the event marketing side, we want to make this work, right? So I think this is kind of giving tips, ideas, and things to everybody so we can talk about it. I would say this is one, in the chat today, if you have frustrations, if you have things that have done that have worked, if you have any stories, put them in there, or throw a question in the Q&A and we can read it to everybody. We are wide open to hearing how people have combated this and how they've done well with working with sales, working with follow-up, and the handoff. All right. So let's take off here. So one of the first things we're talking about is, what are some of the key frustrations? Right. And again, in the chat, write it in there. If you have frustrations with sales, if you have frustrations with the handoff, put them in there. But we listed some of the key ones. One of a big one, I think, is that I've heard often, which really surprises me, but is sales withholding information and withholding inviting prospects and clients for the sake of attribution, being concerned with the attributed value of what would happen with this sale if events got their hand on it. So really not being team players and not playing ball. We're going to get to attribution down the line and why it's a problem and how it's a little bit out of control. But that's one. Two, sales simply not following up, not calling, not following up, not sending the emails. Kathy just listed one in the chat that basically said lack of wanting to do the booth, right? They don't want to do the booth because maybe they've not seen the results, or maybe they've not put the work in or followed the program. And essentially they're not getting anything out of it. So now they have this subjective, negative, half glass full view of it, right? Mm-hmm. Third here is just slow follow-up. That is a big complaint we hear. from talking to event marketers. Just slow. Sales is slow. 2-3 weeks to go by and you're like, hey, how's that batch of leads I gave you? And they're like, yeah, we don't know. Haven't followed up yet. Right. Have other things to do.
I love what Katie just put in there because this is definitely on our list of too many leads are generated and sales doesn't have time to follow up. Like, what are we doing then? If we have too many, how do we process that, right?
Yep. Last one we have here is sales, the leadership in sales, not being a partner and not holding their team accountable. I think that's a good one there, which I like for sure. I got one in the Q&A here from Sarah. Sarah, thanks for putting this in here. I struggle with sales reps not wanting to drive meetings on site at our events when they are not attending. The idea is our leaders are on site. So to help your book of business, you should set up meetings with your prospects, customers, with our leaders. But unless they get to go, they don't want to. I love that, Sarah. Yeah, like I couldn't agree more. I think you have a lot of companies, and we'll talk about this, small companies, medium, big companies. But yes, like events, marketing, sales, this whole ecosystem, it is an ecosystem to close business. I think attribution plays a big piece in that, which is an issue for the way people are compensated and just the entire flow of it. But I love you adding that one in there. Thanks for putting that in. So yeah, so those are some frustrations that we're hearing, some of the complaints, some of the venting sessions, all really valuable and accountable things. And as I'm talking through this, I am thinking like, what if one week we could just get a bunch of sales reps on and have them talk?
Yeah.
Right? Like what if we could get a bunch of sales reps?
Roast panel? No.
If you have any sales reps that are willing to get lettuce thrown at them and shamed, like just give them to us. But I would love to do a show like that. Bring 2 or 3 on that have and go to trade shows for their companies. I think it'd be a great conversation.
I think also what would be really great is who is doing it well. And, Mackenzie Grant, we had on the stage with us at SEMA with our session. And we'll talk through a few of her.
Yeah, she's no nonsense with some of that stuff.
And I think really showing like what is working, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? This is probably an over time when we're looking at like the core framework of how you're approaching events and how you're getting stakeholder alignment. I mean, getting the interdepartmental alignment there is probably the hardest part of it all. I actually really love what Michelle put in the chat too as a challenge is I've been having a lot of pushback from my sales team. I asked them to help me identify who their key accounts were and who we should be targeting before the event. And the sales managers say that they did not have time to do that. That is also a very common thing, right? A lack of time, lack of resources. They're just trying to push deals in and through and to get them closed. And so how do we, all the while we're trying to drive leads in. I think that there's a couple points of our conversation today that will either solve that or give you some direction.
So 2 things here. We have Katie and Sarah both saying they might have some reps. I would say Ish is going to get in touch with you. She's in the chat. I 100% want to get a panel of like 2 or 3 sales reps that work at companies that exhibit and hear the good, the bad, the great, the ugly, all of it. I think it'd be really good as we vent to hear from the other side, right? I also like what Sarah just said. Our attribution is last touch, which sucks because many leads are not yet MQLs. So we put them into nurture and we lose the attribution. Also, when we do opportunity acceleration at events, we get no attribution. Sarah, at the opportunity acceleration and acceleration in the entire journey, this is something that we're talking about more, that I am seeing people talk about more, which is like these touch points that events are getting in all stages of the sales cycle. And events are just a catalyst to accelerate. So companies are going to start to have to find a way to say like, how are these events really influencing pipeline? That's exactly what that means to a degree. All right. So next thing I want to do here, Coty, is I pulled some stats from ChatGPT, my good friend. And I was basically asking about like event sales, follow-up results, and just tried to see, can they scour and find me some really good stats to help tell a story that this is an issue. Right? So the first one I thought was big. It says only 27% of event marketers say they have a clear plan in place for post-event follow-up, right? That is from Adobe that pulled that. And I think it's Marketo is the publication. So 27% of event marketers don't have a plan, right? That leaves way too many people with no real plan for what happens next. Exhibit surveys put together and said 50% of trade show leads are never contacted again after an event. That's high.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's high. Yeah. And I understand that there's junk in there. There's, Mandy would say swag hounds in there and things like that. Like I get that, but 50% is a high number of just never, leads, right? Just never follow up though. So this one relates into what you're saying about badge scans, Coty. This one's from CEIR. right? Which is the Center of Exhibition Industry Research. Only 6% of leads from events ever result in a sales call or meeting. That is low. So there's a lot of factors that play into that 6%. I think not all events that may be getting factored are like pipeline lead driving events, maybe. Also, I think it goes into not every badge scan is a lead, which is probably what they're basing it off of, but still low. This next one's from Demand Metric. More than 70% of event attendees say they are never contacted by sales after visiting a booth. That is a scary one. More than 70% of attendees say they are never contacted by sales after visiting a booth. I think you could throw a lot of variables into this. Obviously, there's a lot of shows with a lot of people that are not ideal customers. I don't know what percentage is target audience when people exhibit every single time. I think there's a lot of variables in that. But yeah, from Bizbo, 79% of event marketers say in-person events are the most effective channel for demand gen, but only 49% have a documented follow-up process. So 2 stats here showing that the event side of the world doesn't have a documented follow-up process. 2 more. This one's from Salesforce. Organizations that follow up with trade show leads within 48 hours are 7 times more likely to qualify and close a lead. Pretty good. Last one is from Adobe again in Marketo, which is B2B companies that tightly align event teams and sales close 67% more deals. So what else they say here? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. I like that. Those are good. Those are telling the story. Yeah, no, but I mean, those are good to pull to help tell the story of what's going on, essentially.
I think it's validating in a way, right? This allows the event marketers that are really trying to figure out how, like, what happens next. These are those moments. So I always say, Jerry, who we work with, he always says the most accidents happen at intersections, right? So the pass off and the things falling through the cracks when we're passing them off from events to sales, it's just very validating to hear these stats.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so 2 things that I want to start with. They're a bit 30,000 foot view, but I think that 2 core things from the work that we do, from the clients that we work with, from the people that we talk to, 2 of the things that I believe to be true in good follow-up post-event. One is, and you know this, but I'm going to say it, alignment and accountability with sales. You need a partner in sales. You absolutely need one. You need a leader. You need a senior person. You need bare minimum a good rep that is at the events that you are like see eye to eye with and understand sort of what the strategy is, what we're trying to accomplish, what the follow-up looks like, how this benefits them and us and the company. Alignment is key. And we can talk more about how to get aligned. And I think a lot of that is, you catch more flies with honey, right? You got to make it about sales. Sales, pretty selfish in general. Like it's a role. They're out to go get what they need to get, which is such a necessary thing. You got to make it about them, in my opinion, and what they need and what they're trying to accomplish and how basically you're teeing them up. I think that's the way to go. But that's one of my 1 core things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sometimes sales just doesn't see the value in it. They think, Mackenzie and I were talking about this, Mackenzie Grant, as I mentioned earlier, is, a lot of times sales might perceive events as a marketing thing, not necessarily a pipeline or a business event. And so finding a way to really show them the value and what's in it for them, it will take time, right? That's giving them not just, badge scans, or as someone said it in here, Mel said, when sales receives a cookie jar of names and contact information without the specifics, seriously, can you blame them for not wanting to pursue those leads? Yeah. And that's true, right? How do you present really good qualified leads versus just a spreadsheet, a massive spreadsheet of names and company info that doesn't really give you any more context, right? So showing the value, getting the alignment with not just the sales individuals, but the leader who's overseeing that entire department, get them bought into the event program and how it can directly impact their pipeline. When the 2 of you are aligned, it's a lot easier for them to go to their sales team and hold them accountable with weekly metrics, weekly check-ins, reporting and such. But
awesome.
That's the hardest thing to overcome,
of course. All right. So the 2 core things here. One is the alignment and accountability with sales. The second, follow up and follow through by you, the event marketer. This is something I've talked to numerous event marketers about. Chase the leads down the line. Understand where they're going. Ask to follow up with these. Where are we at? There were a couple big opportunities. Hey, we had 15 hot leads. These things were good that we qualified, that we know are good. Where are we at? You have to chase it down the line. It sucks. I hate saying it. I hate You all have a lot of work to do. So just saying, oh yeah, go do this too. I get it. But at the end of the day, if you want to influence pipeline, you are going to have to own it and chase it down the line. And I've just seen a lot of people having success when they get to do that.
This can feel overwhelming or daunting at first because, like, you guys are on to the next event, right? You've got a lot of other things to follow up on. But in order really to ensure the proven success metrics for your own department to kind of get more budget to be able to continue doing what you're doing, owning the outcome a little bit more does directly impact you and would be worth your time and energy. So, finding other ways to relieve capacity on other things, how are you simplifying your role on other tasks that are bogging you down so that you can really carve out time to do the post-event follow-up, the tracking, the dashboards, and even as we've discussed, I think Sarah Gannon has talked about this in the podcast before, is there a role that you can carve out within your team that's solely dedicated to post-event follow-up? An event sales coordinator. So something along those lines, getting creative in how you own the outreach at the end might actually prove some success.
I like what Michelle said here in the chat. She says, my sales team has gotten real good at qualifying leads and documenting them within our iCapture. However, they're only documenting qualified leads, not everyone who entered the booth. I still have no idea how many people visit us during the show. So I'd say, Michelle, your team has the more important part down, in my opinion. But I will say there are tools like Zenus that uses AI that you can kind of get a gauge on like impressions and how many people come by. Also, you may need to staff up the booth or get someone that is collecting and scanning badges, because that's really what you're talking about. You come in, I have to scan you. Come in, I have to scan you. There are ways of getting a gauge on exactly how many people actually visited, as long as you clarify what is a visit, right? What is the visit? A walk by is not a visit, right? So I think those are things you could do there. All right. Next piece that we want to take you through is, I think like anything in life and anything we do in work where we have frustrations at intersections, is things are out of your control, right? Like that's anything that you do. You cannot control everything. So understanding what's out of your control, in my opinion, allows you to work more effectively. So here's 3 things that are out of your control: attribution and incentives. They're out of your control at your company. So when attribution and incentives are negatively impacting, say, sales wanting to work on the event, to Sarah's point, setting up meetings, or they're not going to get the attribution, so they don't want to bring them to the host event or something. You have to understand that's out of your control. What you do with it, I'm not sure. Everyone's particular situations are different, but I think it's something to really understand that's out of your control. 2, does the sales team and leadership team see the value of events? If they don't, sometimes that's out of your control. What is in your control is trying to prove to them the value of the event, and that is getting aligned. If we do this together, the outcome could be this. That outcome needs to be good for them. That outcome needs to be new pipeline, accelerating deals, closing deals faster, you name it, whatever stat, whatever metric that you can give them that helps them, that helps sales meet their goals. What goals are you helping sales meet by getting people to the event or being at the event and them doing a good job? 3rd, out of your control, small teams and smaller companies are more effective than the larger companies when it comes to follow-up and sales. They're smaller. They can communicate. They can talk. They could say, hey, you follow up on that? Like when you're a smaller company and you're maybe one event marketer with, a sales leader and 5 salespeople, it's just easier. It's easier. It's simpler. You don't have divisions and regions and verticals and sectors and all these matrix things. So just understand, if you're large or small, if you're larger, you have to navigate those things. If it's smaller, leverage that. Be scrappy. Follow up. You can do it in a spreadsheet sometimes after an event. It's so simple. Anything on those, Coty?
I got to go back to attribution. So it's something I have been saying for a very long time. As a marketer at heart, who's ran departments for a very long time, the shift from the originating source of how that lead came in and attributing all of the credit to that originating source and shifting organizations over to this lifetime relationship model is really probably, like, so many companies and so many organizations are based around the originating source for attribution. Getting organizations to see, and I always talk about it. So as these individual signals are happening, right? A salesperson has a conversation with somebody at a networking event. They see them at a trade show and we have a really good deep conversation. Another salesperson has a phone call with them. All of these things are buying signals. They fill out a form on the website. They see an ad. All of these little things are signals that happen within the relationship, the lifeline of that relationship with that contact. And there, some of the event marketers that have been able to work closely with marketing as a whole, the marketing departments, and find ways to measure and score these signals or touch points that happen along the relationship rather than just sourcing it to the original lead source. Hands down, you have much better way of being able to prove the metrics and how events are impacting the pipeline. Just like you talked about, Matt, the accelerating a deal, somebody that's already in a pipeline and then they have a touch point at a trade show and then they close. Well, that's accelerating a deal. How do you prove that when the original source was the website form? I think bridging the gap between how organizations are currently tracking attribution and how they should be tracking attribution is the hardest thing that can be out of your control.
Love it, love it, love it. I do want to read. I don't know if everyone's in the chat or not, but I think there's just some good stuff said to emphasize. I love what Katie said here. She said, that has been one of my best, hardest lessons to learn. I used to say it's not my responsibility, but yes, owning that responsibility and taking it on propels confidence with leadership, increased budget, and just respect, to be frank. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to encourage buy-in from sales? So Katie, first of all, I 100% agree with you on the ownership part. And on owning it, it does get you recognized. It does build that seat at the table. It make people sit up taller around you, respect you more, and look like, damn, she's all about, not herself and executing her job. She's about what we're trying to accomplish here. She's about this mission. She's about trying to make sure that we drive pipeline, get leads. And I think people just inherently respect that. And it's great for event marketers to be pushing that. Second, do you have tips or tricks on how to encourage buy-in from sales? I think, Katie, it is the type of buy-in that you're looking for. Is it that you want them to be more active and positive in the trade show booth? Is it that you want them to be better at setting meetings for events that they are or aren't going to, or invites to get people to come to your host event? I think it's all different, but my number one thing is you need a leader in sales to work with. You have to have a leader that can influence sales and has some form of control. That is a relationship you have to build. The second thing is don't make it about you and make it about the event. Make it about sales. What do you need from this event? And they'd be like, oh, well, nothing comes from it. It's always dead leads. Okay. I would say, but what if? What would you want from this event? What would make this event worth your while? Right? What would make inviting your best customers and prospects worth your while? What would make your time, energy, and effort at this trade show in the booth worth your while? Ask them, what if? What does that look like? And then when you getting those answers, it's up to you to then reverse engineer it and give that to them if it makes sense, of course. Let's keep rolling here. Good stuff in the chat. I love when the chat's good. Where am I? Oh, we just got done with out of your control. Sorry. We listed the 3 things out of your control: attribution, incentives. Does the sales team have leadership, see value in events, and small teams versus easier teams? All right. So the way we broke this up is into 3 here: before, during, and after, in terms of some tactical things. Questions, throw them in the chat, and we're just going to kind of keep rolling along here. One of the big ones that I am a huge believer in is enable the sales team to understand story and strategy. What is going on at the event? I've told one story a million times. Friend of mine, salesperson, works for a huge company. They were exhibiting in Orlando. They flew him in. I just was at the show, went down to see him. We were going to go to dinner. I walked over, we're talking, and I'm like, what's going on? But he's like, I have no idea. He had no clue. They just flew him in, and he's supposed to be like Mr. Charm on the floor. He's got no idea. What are they trying to accomplish? What are they running demos? Who are they selling? He's just there. I'm like, that's crazy. So I think, what is the story you're selling? What is the strategy? What are you trying to get people to do? Cody, this goes into what we talked about with scripts, language, engagement. What is happening? And you need to have a one-pager built out. Yeah, a why,
the why,
all of those things. Yes.
When do you need to show up? How do you need to show up? What do you need to say? What are the scripts? What happens when you have a good conversation? Give them all of the details so they're fully equipped. to show up and show up on point and be ready to perform.
Love that.
Ooh, Michelle asks, do you recommend role playing? It depends on your team, right? If you aren't confident in the team showing up on the floor and performing the way that you need them to on the floor, then yeah, practice it. The goal would be is once you get that leadership alignment and the sales team and everyone else that might be on the floor is really bought in to showing up to the events and that it will make an impact on their pipeline, they should all be craving and climbing over top of each other to get a spot on the floor. And those should be the people that are ready to perform, ready to show up with high energy and really do what they need to do to share the story and to drive leads in. So role playing, sure. But if it's somebody that's like, just going to drop their backpack off in the closet and go hit up coffee and talk to people and be a swag hound themselves, I don't know if they're really, do they deserve a spot?
So hey Mel, glad you're here, my friend. Shouldn't the booth staff get spiffed? I'm losing in chat. Shouldn't the booth staff get spiffed for leads that turn into orders? I mean, yeah, I think so. I just don't know. Again, size of company is such a complexity in this from my experience, from having these conversations with clients and people is like the complexity is size of company. The complexity is regions, verticals, services they're selling, cross-selling. That's part of the complexity here. But yes, I mean, I think I have a small thing here that we kind of put in here, but I think this would be interesting just based on Mel's question, but is you're trying to set up like KPIs or things or like a gaming it or whatever. So like, what percentage of leads are followed up within 48 hours? How do you incentivize that? Right? What percentage of event leads convert to opportunities? How do you incentivize that? Meetings booked per rep at the event. It's always a big one for me. Book the meeting at the meeting for after the meeting, right? And pipeline generated. So how do you take some key things there and gamify them for sales at the event and give away, I don't know, dinner gift cards, vacation, whatever it may be, depends how valuable the pipeline is and how valuable it is to move the ball down the field with everything that you're doing here. Okay, so staying with before, tactical things before. This one actually came from, I think Michael's last name is
Clark.
Clark. Duncan. I said Duncan. I'm thinking of
He's from Marriott.
Michael Clark, Marriott, super nice guy. We just met him at SEMA. He was in our session and he told us that he has an agreement pledge. So when sales are going to his events, he makes them sign a pledge. People can break pledges, but honorable people to a degree, when you hand someone a pledge and push it across the table and they sign it, I think it's a way of holding people accountable. I actually really like this. And I know you liked it too, Coty.
Yeah, I think that it brings a level of loyalty and seriousness, right? And just like, hey, listen, I'm doing what I say I'm going to do, what you're asking me to do. And it allows for accountability at the end. So at the end of the day, if they say, yeah, I'm going to get all these leads and I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to do the follow-up within the 24 hours as you guys are asking me to, I'm going to upload everything into the CRM as you need me to with all the detailed notes. And then you go and you pull a report and you say, John Doe came and he uploaded one lead and there was no information. Well, he's really kind of falling back on the pledge that he originally promised.
I actually really like what Allison said here. If only we could have influence on whether someone deserves to be at the event. Allison,
Oh, true.
I think that's a drum you should be beating. I would be saying, can I have say in this? Can I select who's supposed to be there? Why can't I have influence over the people that are best on the show floor? And I would actually argue sometimes it's not always salespeople. There are some really great salespeople that are just not great in person. They're great on the phone. They're great via email. They're great at executing their job. They're good at prospecting. They're good at different things. So I would say, Allison, you won't know till you ask, and maybe kind of like lean on that a little bit, but I would encourage it for sure.
Yeah, I think identifying like who's your biggest company advocates, who knows the process and can talk to a lot of different things. Sometimes it's a product expert. Sometimes it's,
Michelle's saying customer service right now. She's saying she's having that conversation here in the chat. I think it's great.
Customer service. There's always these like superstars within your company that maybe have been there for a long time and know the story and know how to show up and just know how to build relationships. That's all you need.
Social butterflies. You need people that are willing to engage, look someone in the eye, talk, ask them questions, right? Like those are,
Just say, Yvonne said in here, she said, we have a comprehensive training. Oop, the chat's moving so fast. I'm trying to catch up.
It is moving fast.
Yvonne says we have a comprehensive training in place for both booth staffers and an agreement that they're signing about expectations as well. Subsequently, we have a no-fly list. A no-fly list. I love that. If they're not showing up, they're not signing the pledge, they're not passing the expectations in the training, No fly, no go. That's the
All right,
best.
let's go on to the next one after the pledge. So second is, Coty and I discussed this. It's having real clarity on what an MQL and what an SQL is. Does everybody know? So this goes back to enabling your sales team. So the people on the, does everyone know what an MQL is and an SQL? Is there a definition? Is there clarity on that? I think that's such a specific to make sure that you're better at qualifying leads, better at understanding what's going to be passed along afterwards, and better off understanding like who are we going to be talking to while we're at the show floor here.
Yeah, so every event sometimes will have different qualifiers of what types of conversations and touch points and signals are really qualifying an MQL versus an SQL and what happens after. So I think having an overall department plan for what an MQL versus an SQL is and identifying those, but also specifically for each event, having a plan of what happens after.
All right, we got a question from Shayna. Hi, Shayna. Let's do it. It says, what are some approaches you have taken getting in terms of getting the sales team to think beyond the booth? For instance, holding them accountable or gamify attending sessions and networking, such as booth is an office concept and the entire event is the opportunity. Sorry, I stammered over that one. Coty, what do you think here?
I love this concept of the entire event is the opportunity because I 100% agree with that. How are you connecting with individuals outside of just the booth footprint itself? Sometimes the best conversations are while you're waiting to get coffee with somebody else next to you or in the elevator going from floor to floor. That comes with the prep in advance, right? Prepping the team with who is doing what and when. So if they are required to work the floor, to show up at other sessions, to be in other areas, building out a schedule as best as possible, I think is helpful because it really does show a level of strategy on how and where you're showing up. And at the end of the day, accountability is key. So if somebody's just, dropping off their bag and you never see them, which I think happens a lot, what happens, right? Who's holding them accountable and who's telling them that they can't go anywhere?
Shayna, one thought I have on this, and I really like the question, is I think sometimes salespeople have a perception of events that is essentially that you get in the booth and I'm there to sell. And really, it's far from that. Events is about relationship building. Events is about connection. Events is about engagement. Events is about curiosity. Events is about it's not just the booth. There's the booth, there's the breakfast, there's the networking, there's the evening, there's the dinners, there's all these different things. And I think sometimes it takes somebody to explain that to them, right? Like the booth is just not this area. You're not in a booth with a bow and arrow just waiting for someone to walk in. Like that's not what it is. The booth is one of the touch points. It's one of the areas to engage, but the entirety of the event, I would have my sales team ready to go when attending an event from start to finish, from the entire experience. Why are we there? We're there to engage. Who are we there to engage? What's important to them? How are we having those conversations? Where can we get in front of them in a meaningful way that's good for them and good for us and not intrusive on them? It's just an entire ecosystem for the event. And I really think it's just having the conversation and again, being able to select your team. Some salespeople get it. Some salespeople do not. Okay, next one, identifying key targets. I don't think that people do this enough. I don't think people do this enough where they're like, hey, we're going to this event. Talk again, if you have a good partner in sales, hey, we're going to ABCD event and I really want to get from your team. What are the biggest targets? Who are the potentials? Do we know if they're going? Can we reach out to them ahead of time? How do we build a top 20 list, a top 25? Who are the top 10 people? Top 5 sometimes is enough. Who do we need to get in front of? Who should we be looking for? Who should we be inviting to things? Key targets, identifying them, doing that with sales.
With that, I think it's really important to understand, you can get real deep with this knowledge too. If you're identifying, say, top 20, 30 key contacts, what they look like, what their LinkedIn profile is, and then encouraging sales or you guys doing it yourself of reaching out to them via LinkedIn, like, hey, I'm going to be there. Can't wait to see you. I'll find you in the coffee line or whatever. But having a plan on how you're going to reach out to them, I think is going to be really important. But this, as Michelle said earlier, it can be a challenge to identify them. And so working within your CRM, with your marketing team, and of course your sales team of how can you identify those? It's hard, but worth it.
All right. Last before the event tactic. And we talk about this pre-scheduling meetings. You want to improve sales relationship follow-up. It is getting pre-scheduled meetings. How do you do that? Right? How do you get pre-scheduled meetings? And I do think a lot of that comes from alignment. And I do think a lot of that comes from like, what is the advantage to sales afterwards? If they're scheduling meetings prior to get people to the booth or get people to the event or get people to the dinner, if they do that, what's in it for them? Why is it worth their while? You understand why. You have to relay that. Can you gamify it? Can you make it a contest? Also, just in general, why is it good for them? Does it accelerate deals? Do they sell? Right? Whatever it may be. All right, Coty, let's switch to during the event. Some tactical things that help the handoff, that help the process, that help follow up. First one we have here is lead grading. Lead grading to me is huge. And I think you need a system. And don't just say A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, or warm, hot, and cold. That's like, what do those things mean? The clarity. And again, this is explaining strategy and having what is actually, what do those things
What's an
mean?
A lead?
Yeah. What's an A lead? What is that to us? Because if there's clarity on that and you're doing the work on the ground to qualify people, you know how to qualify people. When you pass on those leads down the line, there's just more value to them. And you as the event marketer have more confidence in that lead to say, hey, did you call it? You email? Did you follow up? No, why not? It's an A lead. I know it's an A lead. Yeah. We're qualifying.
It's not. They're ready. Yeah. They're waiting for you to call them. And I think that gets into the next thing during the show of the personalization, having a plan in place ahead of time with scripts, who's reaching out and how they're reaching out to those A leads. What happens with the B leads and the C leads? Are C leads just getting added to a general list? Having a strategy around that, I think, is really important. Sometimes it's even more personalized. If you have an A lead right on the floor, go immediately connect with them on LinkedIn, right? That way you're instantly connected. You send them a note, just say, hey, it's great to talk to you. With lead grading, also, if it's an A or B lead, how do you personalize those notes? And I know we kind of talk about, do they have kids? Are they going on a trip? What other kind of like random things came up in the conversations, and how do you really enhance those notes so that you can have really meticulous outreach to them afterwards?
People work with who they know, like, and trust, right? And the other category of who they work with is if you can absolutely solve a problem for them, right? So just personalization is listening to somebody, remembering things they said, and then personalizing it in your follow-up. It is such an advantage. It's such an icebreaker. It's such a way to get to the next step with somebody. It makes them feel heard and seen, which is really what most people want. All right.
Two good quick things here in the chat. Katie says, knowing who owns what territory, state, vertical, and yes, tiering. But if you're as small as we are, it's my job to make sure they know. I like that. Also, Christina says, we tie the number of pre-booked meetings to event attendance, i.e., unless a mini number of meetings is pre-booked, sales rep is excluded from attending the event.
Oh, I love it. I love that. That's great. Book meetings or you're out. I love it. That's so good.
Ticket in.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. All right, last one for during the event. Everybody's pumped about that one. That one.
Katie's
that one went off. Yeah, that one was great. Yeah, she's hired. Love it. Okay, last one for the during is lead capture and CRM. There are a lot of great tools. They're out there. The information is there. I don't want to call it seamless, but it's way better than it was 10 years ago. You have to leverage your tools at the event. There are a lot of tools that allow you to scan, load to the CRM, put personalized notes, schedule follow-ups. It does it all for you. A lot of tools. Make sure you're using them and make sure you're making that process of follow-up much easier. All right, Coty, let's get to the after the event. This is obviously one of the bigger ones here, handoff. So I like the 24-hour rule for hot lead. Hot lead, good conversation, a dire need, things are simpatico, whatever you want to call it. Hot lead, 24 hours to follow up. You do not let conversations slip. Some of the stats, I don't know what I did with my stats. Some of the stats that we threw in here, all touching on speed to lead, all touching on the fact that there's a lack of follow-up. So you have this great conversation. Just remember, when people are at events, they are present in their mind for the most part of the problems they have in their business, the things they're trying to learn, whatever it is that they're seeking to gain from this event. So if you have a conversation and you have a solution to their problem, you're talking and they're interested and things are moving along, you wait 2-3 days. So stupid.
Don't forget about you.
So stupid. Yvonne, can I share the stats? Yes, I can definitely share the stats. You'll get to see how good my ChatGPT prompting skills are. which surprise, surprise, they're not great. So yes, I think that is such a big part on that 24-hour rule. Don't let stuff slide. Don't let things go. Make sure you have a system for immediate follow-up on the real good stuff, because sometimes at an event, it takes one deal. It takes one new client. It takes one lifetime value of a client to pay for that event, to keep the chains moving. It's so important.
But either way, rules just need to be established, right?
Yes.
So, I think 24 hours for A leads or hot leads is an absolute necessity. Don't make assumptions that, you're not going to they're not going to open their email or do anything until they come back from after the event and travel. No, get on it, connect with them, whether it be LinkedIn, email. What are the types of touch points so that you're in their inbox, you guys are connected, and you're not wasting the time. But B and C leads also should have rules. What's happening and who's handling them? What are the rules that you want to establish that make sense for your business for B and C leads?
All right. Having an established process for hot, warm, and cold leads. What happens? So now you've established your lead grading. So what happens with these different grades? Whether they're 1, 2, 3, 4, hot, warm, cold, whatever. Do it like if you have an established process. The process on the end, it just flows. It goes. You've already thought, you have a 24-hour rule on hot leads. On warm leads, they're being distributed to who they need to be distributed to with personalized notes, and they have a week to follow up, and they got to make X amount of calls and X amount of emails. A cold lead, they go into marketing, they go into nurture, they go into whatever it is. Maybe a hot lead, you're going to send a gift. Like, you have these amazing conversations, you have somebody on the verge of working with you, or maybe they're in the process of working with you, or it's a partnership or something large. Why not have some way of working with marketing to send that person a gift after the event? Very thoughtful. I'm big on same day touch points. I love that. I love same day touch point at the event. Send a quick note. Send it in the app of the event. Send it on LinkedIn. Send it in an email. Send it in a text. However you have the communication with the person. Great seeing you today. Enjoyed the conversation about ABC. Even better way to follow up is to be like, hey, we're going to dinner tonight with a group of Becks. Would you like to join us? Or, hey, we're attending that event tonight. Do you want to ride with us? Or, hey, you never know who needs to third wheel it. You never know who's there and who they're with and where they want to go and how an evening can accelerate. So make the ask. But that immediate touch point to me is very big. And I think a lot of people don't do it enough. They wait, they collect, but they don't do anything with it at the event.
Yes. So I think that kind of leads to the follow-up, right? The reporting. There's the leading and there's the lagging type of reporting that I think is pretty important and needs to be consistent from both sales and from the events.
Hold on. Great question here from Christina. Sorry, I just saw it. Christina, good question. It says, any best practices as to who is best to do the follow-up? At my companies, there's friction between sales attended the event wanting to do the follow-up themselves versus BDRs following up as per company policy. There's often friction leading and wasting valuable time. Christina, great question. I think this, Coty, you can chime in, whenever, but my take is pure practicality. If I have a salesperson that's at an event that's had a conversation with somebody and it would potentially be their lead or their territory or their region or whatever it is, and they're a salesperson to have the answer, 24-hour follow-up right now, right then, send the same day text, send that, pass it to the BD down the line if you have to, if it needs to go back that way. But that's just practical to me. Why would a salesperson have a great conversation, then be like, hey, I'm going to have Mary, who's a BD for us, she's going to get in touch with you. But then if things go well, they'll kick it over to me.
Then she's going to kick it back to me.
What a wonky. But then also, I think to your point, Christina, or with what you're saying, that could be a really great process for a warm lead. For somebody that's like, hey, they definitely have a need. Let's get them in our cycle. Let's get them in our follow-up. Let's get them in our system of, we've identified that they could be a good fit, that they could be ideal. They're not up for contract. They don't need what we have right now, whatever it may be, but give that to a BD. I think it's perfect. So I think there's practicality to it. And when you're pitching it or explaining it to executives or leadership, practicality should lead towards results. So if we want pipeline at this event. So if we want pipeline and we want to close deals and we want to get opportunities and accelerate deals, why would I hold a really great lead that I've had a conversation with and give it to somebody else that's in BD that they've never met before? That's not going to produce pipeline in my eyes. And any executive that's like, nope, follow the protocol, they suck. That's they suck.
Unfortunately, many organizations are
but they don't know then they don't know what they're doing. That's just dumb, right? But the other way, it's just plotting it with practicality is really
Yeah.
what it is. What are you
And not
trying
even
to
just
accomplish?
practicality, but the ultimate customer experience. What is going to lead to building trust and building a relationship? Well, flip-flopping somebody from who you had a personal conversation and connection with all the way to a BDR and then back to them maybe based on territory, it's just clunky and it's not
It's got to make
the most
sense.
ideal. Yeah, it's got to make sense. Absolutely. It's got to make sense for the customer and what will lead to not breaking the trust that you've already
And I think
established.
it can get tricky depending on the size of the company, Cody, right? Like the size and the verticals and the territories. I think that does change things. But like
Mhm.
in a perfect world, if you're getting people on the same page, it's like, why not shoot an email that day
Sure.
and be like, hey, Megan, great talking to you today. Really enjoyed meeting you on the floor. Cody here on this email was actually your point of contact. And I've already shared with them every single thing that we talked about. Boom, rolling, right? So it's just
That's a good smooth pass
practical
off
measure. Yes.
if it makes sense.
Practical measures. Great question, Christina. Thank you.
So let's just kind of wrap up a little bit about the leading and
Sure.
lagging
Go
reporting
ahead.
too. I think that this is something that you love to talk about. I think it's something that's really important. And I think it really depends on the organization and how you're structured and how reporting happens, right? What type of CRM you're using, how you're tracking attribution, right? All along, is it a basic spreadsheet that you have the sales team adding notes into that you originally gave to them so that you can kind of at a glance take a look at the status of follow-up? Or is it having marketing tagging these individuals in your CRM and pulling a report and having a dashboard? So immediate lead touch points, I think, is like your leading metric to track, but then there's also lagging metrics. What else is happening 6 months from that conversation? Who's following up with them 3 months, 3 weeks from the event, and all of the other types of conversions that could happen. So I think the leading versus lagging reporting is really key, and it should be ongoing, right? You shouldn't just have one report and then nobody ever touches it again. How are you consistently working with sales on this regular type of reporting that's happening every week or every month with status updates?
Well, Cody, I love that we kind of landed this plane 4 minutes early. I think it's great. We took a bunch of questions,
So
ran
much
through
stuff to
it.
talk
This was
about.
good. Yes, I'll close with just because we were talking about leading lag. I'll close with the 4 KPIs for post-event performance. God, I'm stumbling over today. Percentage of leads followed up with within 48 hours. I love tracking that, right? Because it's not allowing things to lag and it's putting a number to it to show leadership. I guarantee if you show your CEO something that says, hey, only 20% of our leads are being followed up with 40 hours, they're going to be aggravated, or somebody in leadership. Percentage of event leads that convert to opportunities. Love that one, right? Meetings booked. And on that one, just clarity, doesn't matter if it's the attribution or not. Just does not matter to me. How about just getting a touch point for like, hey, we had a touch point. They came to our dinner. They came to our booth. They came to our event. They came to our engagement, whatever it may be. Why don't you start tracking that pattern of what gets into pipeline? And then the last pipeline generated per event, but everybody's doing that, or at least you should be. All righty. Cody, nice job.
Good
Great
stuff.
work. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending an hour with us. Cody, you're fantastic as always. And we'll catch
You
everybody
guys are
next time.
great.
See you later.